Hello and welcome to the IPPS-A Sustainment Webinar Series. Today's webinar is an advanced ad hoc business intelligence course. My name is Captain Mauricia McLean and I am your moderator for today's webinar. Joining as the primary speaker is Major Myron Bishop. Major Bishop is an IPPS-A business intelligence analyst here at IPPS-A. Before we begin, I have a few items to cover about this presentation and the DCS webinar platform. First, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available on both the IPPS-A YouTube channel and the IPPS-A S1Net training page. Second, if your DCS connection drops during the webinar, please close your browser and use the provided DCS link to reconnect. If you would like to download parts of this presentation during the webinar, please use the download icon located below the presentation window. And lastly, please post your questions to the public chat panel so that we can answer them throughout the session. In addition to live responses, all questions and their corresponding answers will be posted with this video to the IPPS-A YouTube channel and the IPPS-A S1Net training page. Your questions and feedback matter, so please share. So without further ado, I now welcome Major Bishop.
Thank you, Mauricia. Good morning, Major Myron Bishop. Just a quick introduction. Been on the IPPS-A program for about a year. Just a little bit about my background. I've done I'm an AG officer, done some of the typical operational assignments like Brigade, Battalion S1. I commanded a force, a support company, and I'm a National Guardsman as well. Today, I'd like to give a soft introduction to business intelligence. We're going to go over some of the data analytic fundamentals so that long-term, us as HR professionals, we can eventually become tool agnostic, give you a little orientation of what that looks like specific to OBIE, but also try to talk fundamentals and principles. Don't be intimidated if any of this doesn't make sense to you. Feel free to ask questions. This is not necessarily an easy topic. A certification requires a 40-hour course and shadowing an expert. One of our lead developers here says it took him 5 years and 3 implementations before he felt comfortable with OBIE. And a lot of what I'm showing you today comes from a 458-page product guide with intimate details. While I'm glossing over this topic, I'm covering in 30 minutes what's probably covered in about 3 days worth of Oracle training. Don't be intimidated. This is not necessarily the type of thing that we are used to doing as HR professionals, at least not these tools specifically. We normally use other tools to do some of these things. All right, so first I'd like to quickly do a quick reminder on just how to access Ad Hoc BI. I showed this in a previous webinar, but I'd like to go over it quickly here. If you look at the top right where you can personalize your home page, the Ad Hoc BI tile that you see on my screen is not organic to any specific role or subcat in the IPPS-A. So you have to add that tile manually by going to Personalize Homepage. Then on the top right, let's see, I don't think you can see it on my screen here. But on the top right, here, let's do this adjustment there. On the top right, you're going to click Add Tile. You can search Ad Hoc. Make sure to select Ad Hoc BI HCM. This should be the only option now, but in the past there was an ELM option. The ELM option doesn't have any data in it right now, so you won't get any results if you use that. You can also click Save on the top right. In order to add the tiles, you have to have the correct roles. I'm going to read them out loud right now. I'm going to read the roles out loud right now, but they are We'll also post them with this video later so you can have them to reference. So it's the IPPS-A Ad-Hoc Bi HCM tiles and the IPPS-A dashboards create. I've seen quite a few CRM tickets where people have access to the tiles, but they still can't actually get into the ad hoc portion of BI. That's one good troubleshooting step, is to make sure you have all the roles that are associated with ad hoc. So quickly moving into what we see when we get into the ad hoc screen, this is called the analysis screen. That's Oracle's term for it. The analysis screen is basically the building block of how you create a report or dashboard or roster. So the three main things I'm going to go through is creating a roster so we can see kind of that by name information that most HR people who are working at the unit level kind of want to see is what people are in this category, like last evaluation, APFT, that sort of thing. Then I will show you ways that we can create reports and visualizations so we can see like numbers, percents, and graphs and charts. And then from there I'll show you how to put it on the dashboard. We currently have an enhancement request to be able to save those dashboards. So once that's implemented, you'll be able to build a dashboard and let other people open that up and see that report based on their row level security. So if you look at the folders on the left, the top of that folder called IPPS-A ACM Analytics is what's called a subject area. And within the subject area, it has all the columns, dimensions, and facts that you can select from to build your analysis. So essentially what was built in Release 2 is a SRB plus. So all the elements that make up a SRB, and then the elements that were needed to build the HRAR and readiness and manning per stat report. So when you look at these fields, they'll correlate to those things that you're already used to seeing in OBIEE. We do have an enhancement request to bring additional data elements in from HCM. So you will have expanded capability in the future. But keep in mind, as we move to R3, R3 is going to increase the number of metrics significantly, like 10 times as many metrics. So some of the dashboards and reports you build in R2 may have to be built again in R3. It'll all be dependent on the data element, and we'll be transparent and upfront about who that affects when we get there. But I did want to be clear that unleashing this tool now, some of those things may have to be rebuilt in R3. One cool TTP I like to do is, as I'm working in OBIEE, I'll periodically go over to HCM and I will just take an action over in HCM so that I don't time out in BI. They're technically two different modules, so you have to keep that relationship going so that you can keep working on your analysis. So coming back to the analysis screen, there are three types of columns that you can grab on the analysis screen. I'm going to just pull one of these folders down, go to strength analysis, and then fact, position strength. So if you notice these rulers, these are what are called measures, meaning they're built, they're calculated items that are pre-calculated for us. So these are measurements, and they in the background they're based on fact tables, meaning we don't necessarily have, meaning that this is all a calculated number, right? We see this other table-looking thing, that's called an attribute column. And so any different elements that exist, they can have different attributes. So if I were to go up to this soldier record brief section and click on something like member information, you can see that a service member or a soldier might have lots of different attribute tables. And so the facts will generally give you your counts and calculations, while the attributes you can use to study those attributes, or you can use those as a dimension. So a dimension is an already predefined way to sort and categorize your data. So if you see some of these folders that start with dim, that means they are designed as a dimension so that they can work intentionally with other metrics within the warehouse. So understanding that will help you get good results as you start mixing and matching different fields and trying to figure out what the correct field to use is. So just to get started, let's go ahead and build a quick roster. So I'm going to go ahead and go back up to the member information. I will grab, a DOD ID, maybe their business unit. You can just drag and drop these. You can also double click them. You can grab the IMPL ID, and if I know I want something but I don't really know where it's at, I can use the search function, and I can find, and it'll find it. So, let's say I wanted the last evaluation date. I hover over that field, and it shows me the navigation to how to get to that field. So I know that it was in the ATM Analytics subject area under Soldier Record Brief and then the career field data. So let's grab a last evaluation date and let's grab last APFT date. I'm grabbing random fields, but there are other fields available like home phone if you were trying to do some type of alert roster. But I'm just grabbing a few things just to get this going. You'll notice for each of these columns, there are little widgets. And from there, I can do all types of formatting and styling. I won't go into too much detail on the formatting because you can actually do a lot of customization with what it looks like. But I think we really want to get after the data. So the one thing I would like to show, though, is you can go ahead and do conditional formatting just like you might do in, say, Excel, right? Let's say we wanted to look at that last APFT and see the ones that were, make the ones that were, a year old red. We would do that in this with this conditional button. All right. So it gives me options to start building that conditional. Also, when I hover over the widget, I can do sorting options for my columns, right? And then the nice thing is I can go ahead and make that column a filter. Usually, if we have a column in our analysis, a lot of times we just, let's go ahead and make that a filter because I know this is something I would want to narrow my population down with. I'm not going to do it that way because I also want to show you on the bottom right, which I believe you can't see on the screen. Let's see if I can adjust my screen a little bit. All right, I've adjusted my screen so you can see the filter button. It looks a little bit like a funnel, and by default, the columns that you've selected are available to filter on. But you can also select more columns so you can filter on anything specific. So let's say I wanted to do soldier record brief again, member information, and let's do active status program code. I'm not a machine guy, so I'm going to pick the description. I know some of the descriptions are not great. It's still very abbreviated and things like that. But looking at them, you can kind of guess which one you want to use. So for this one, I'm just going to do full-time Manning state, which should get most of your AGRs. I know there's some other codes that you would select, but I'm selecting this one just for simplicity, just for the example. Right. So once I have my filter set, once I have columns that I know I want to use, I can go back to the top left and select the Results tab. What the Results tab does is it'll basically display a subset of my results so I can see what comes out. So what you'll first notice is there's two areas. There's a outside title box and a table box. These are called views. So the compound layer is where you we put the pieces together, your building blocks of your analysis. And each of those are called views. So you see on the bottom left it says title and table. All the views that exist in this analysis can go right down here on the bottom, in this bottom area. All right, so for the title, you'll notice I have one set of edit options when I click on the pencil. They're pretty limited, but there are a few things I can do there. But if I click on the table pencil, since it's a table, I get more options. You see prompts, sections, column measures, and exclude. So column measures are the columns that I selected when I was over in the criteria tab. But now that I'm creating views, I can be a little bit more flexible. Let's say I specifically wanted to, instead of having business unit in my analysis, I wanted to select business unit as a drop-down. I would move it over to the prompts, and that would allow me to use it to make it selectable. Prompts is kind of an Oracle term. Technically, it's different than the filter because a filter, I'm literally filtering my data down, but a prompt is saying, hey, user, pick the thing that you want to select. So that's, Major Bishop would call it a filter, but trying to stick with industry Oracle terms, it's called a prompt. You'll notice a few options up here, right? I don't have to display the results. I can hide them. This is particularly useful if you have a big data set and you want to get all your settings together while you're trying to organize that stuff. And you can show or hide this layout pane. The selection steps is another step you can use to narrow your data down. And then you can edit properties just like the others. I have these other three criteria to add a calculated measure, a group, and a calculated item. I'll show you a calculated measure in the next section, but I did want to just point those buttons out to you. I'm going to go ahead and click Done. So if I didn't go anywhere else, you learned how to put a roster together. And you can actually export this, right, in multiple different formats. So if you just need the data really quick, export to Excel, export data, PDF and HTML are options. And for your final analysis, you can actually do some specific print options on how the thing exports. All right, so assuming you probably want to come back to this later, I am going to save this analysis. I am going to save it as 3 March roster. Oh, okay. I'm going to save it as 3 March roster. You can add a description so you know what it is when you come back to it. I'm saving it to my folder selections, and you're going to be the only person who can see this analysis and come back to it. All right, so now I'm going to create a new analysis. Again, remember, if you see an ELM subject area, do not select that. You won't get any data. Select the HCM subject area. This time, I'm going to go to my strength analysis. This time, I am going to pick a fact, like count of employees assigned. And I am going to pick a fact on, I'm going to pick dimension, position strength. I'm going to pick the dimension strength position. And I'm going to select MRC, whatever it may be. All right. Just to keep it interesting, member information. Keep it interesting, I'll still keep the business unit in there. All right. If I take this over to my results tab, it's going to do the same thing, give me the roster. But this time what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new view. I can get some recommendations from OBIEE based on the type of information I'm looking at. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and build a pie chart. All right, so you can see the first view at the top, and then you can see the second view at the bottom. So because when one of my other analysis, I put the business unit as a prompt, it naturally put that there. So again, I can click the pencil to edit it. Keep in mind, I can also select graph at the lower left, and I can rename that view as well to access it from there. I'm going to click on the pencil. Let's say I want the business unit in the top view, but I don't want it in this view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, and I'm going to drag it down to exclude it over here. You see now that I'm in a pie chart as opposed to a table, my options for how I move those measurements and columns around change to that specific graphic. If you look to the bottom right, you can see it says sample. From there, where it says MRC is the legend. So I can, instead of having that on the right of the graph, I can move it to the left, I can move it to the bottom, I can move it to the top. So in this sample, it allows me to move the primary objects that belong to that view. Right? I really want to get fancy, I can make it 3D instead of 2D, and I can do all type of graphic things. I can still display or not display the results, and some of those other options that exist above are there. So I'm going to click Done. and I'm going to leave that visualization down there at the bottom. So let's go to this table. We see we see kind of all the MRC categories there, but let's say you know, sometimes we want to see our MRC 1s and 2s grouped together, and so when we group the MRC 1s and 2s together, you know, we want to, like, all those people are deployable, right? We don't always necessarily need to see that separate. So let's go ahead and click edit that and see if there's something we can do here. What I'm going to do is do a new calculated item. And so I don't want business unit, I want it on the MRC, and I'll call it MRC, I'll call it medically ready, MRC 1 and 2. All right. Go ahead over here to HCM and the thing where I keep it live. Hard today. You can see on the function, I can select the type of calculation that I want to do on this metric. You'll also notice just some basic arithmetic buttons there at the bottom that also help. All right, I'm going to cancel this out and try it again. New calculated item. Business unit, MRC. There we go. All right, so the easy way out, I can select the two and click the arrow over. I can also type these things in to do the calculation. Hit OK. As you can see, in that business unit, I now have a new column called medically ready. But we're in the Army, right? And we want our numbers to match up, right? So we don't want those people double counted. So let me go back and edit that again. Let me edit that calculated item. So go to, here's one way that I can do it, is click on the MRC widget. So in addition to the normal items I have access to, I can also select that new calculated item that I created and click on that to edit it. There's a little button right here called Remove Calculated Item Members from View. And this is what will make it combine. I can also do sort options and get fancy, but I just want to give you a quick indicator of some of the calculations you can do. I'm not going to demonstrate this here, but if you do a new calculated measure, you can actually grab different metrics and attributes that currently exist and do your own formulas and statements, right? If I click the function button, similar to Excel, if it's numbers, I can do, calculations on there. I can go down to analytics and use some of the tools that exist naturally in SQL and OBIEE to to analyze my data. So what this does is create a whole new column that calculates a completely new value based off of whatever input I put in there. I'm going to go ahead and hit done. So you see my top view has the table in it with MRC 1 and 2. My pie chart have them split out because I left them split out. I'm going to go ahead and save that because this is the building block for our dashboard. So 3 March 4. So if we go to dashboards, the only dashboard you're going to have access to is my dashboard. Right now, my dashboard is displaying whatever I saved last time. So I'm going to edit that dashboard. I click on the widget on the right of the screen so I can edit the dashboard. You see on the left, there are some new options like an action link, which literally is a link that I can build to take me to another place. Embedded content. I can add columns just like I add columns to an analysis. But when I look on the bottom left in what's called the catalog, that's where I saved the information. Let's go. All right, where did I? So in that folder where I saved this analysis, I can get rid of the old content by clicking X's on the top right of each little section. But what I can also do is add a new page to the dashboard. I can call it page 2. I can call it whatever I want. Good stuff. Page 2 is blank. I take my analysis, I can drop it to the top, and I can drop the roster below that or above it. Click preview, I can see what it looks like. As you can see, it's on the screen. I can come back to it. The widget gives me some other options, and then I can obviously save the dashboard on the top right. I want to delete the page. I delete current page next to the widget. So that's kind of the general overview of what tools are available in OBIEE within IPPS-A R2. I know it can be a lot. Like I said, this covers about 3 days worth of material, and we just covered it in about 30 minutes and a little bit more than that. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We will post this online so that you can reference it again in the future. And again, use the Oracle Product Guide because it has a lot of details on how some of these functions are supposed to work together. That's all I have. Marisha?
Okay, so we have one question from the chat panel. What is the refresh rate for data?
That's a great question. So I'm going to go back to the new analysis, but it depends on what you're looking at. Specifically, there are two main kind of data refresh cycles we talk about in Release 2. There is the nightly load. So anything that's included in this strength analysis, in these strength analysis folders, and these dimension folders, and the fact tables. That's all calculated the previous night when they do the daily process of bringing data from HCM over to OBIEE. When we're looking at SRB data, they're running what we call the 60-second job. So soldier information on the SRB is intended to be updated every 60 seconds. So some of the info will be near real time, but any of the strength and fact information will be based on information from the previous nightly run.
All right, so I have another question. What are some of the things coming into R3 that will make this better?
So some of the improvements for R3 include, number one, an extensive number of metrics available. So we've identified over 300 metrics that are useful to the Army for the system integrator to build in R3, and for us to have access to on demand. There are some problems with what was delivered currently. If I look at the department hierarchy, you'll notice it only goes 13 levels. And if you looked at the Army hierarchy from the top of the Army to the lowest level, it is actually 26 levels. They're going to have to expand this department hierarchy so that it works across the entire Army for it to work. And that's actually why the reports that are delivered now, like the HRAR, require you to select a UIC, because the hierarchy doesn't cover the entire force.
Okay, so I have another couple questions. Are the data fields changing with the new data warehouse field? If they do, will you convert my names to new names so I will not have to rebuild the report?
So with the R2 enhancement, there should be no changes to names in R2. And if there are changes to names, that would be specified in release notes. So that part of it should not be affected in R2. In R3, any reports, so any of the reports that are delivered right now, so the HRAR, Readiness and Manning Analytics, any of the fields that exist on those reports will be converted to R3 so that it'll be basically seamless, no change. You'll use the same name, and you won't have to basically rebuild that piece. Anything new from the R2 enhancement may need to be rebuilt in R3. It'll be a coin flip, field by field. It's a great question.
Do you have any other questions or comments from the field? Wait a couple more moments in case we're typing. All right. Oh, well, here we go. So we do have one other question. So any other Oracle courses available at PEC or the SSI?
I'm currently not aware of any Oracle-specific courses other than what's available in Skillport. I do know both the SSI and PEC have discussed integrating some of this in their training and their POI. And I know we're working closely with those folks to get the right training. My recommendation specifically would be to focus more on data analytics rather than a specific tool, So that way you can become tool agnostic as an HR professional of the future. That way we don't have all of our HR professionals experts in OBIEE. They'd be experts in data analytics. And that's the messaging that the program gave to the commandant of the AG school recently.
And we do have another question. Are we currently receiving input from all three components for the R3 build?
Yes, we currently have input from all three components. There are USAR LNOs on the team, GUARD LNOs on the team, and also as we have working groups and things like that, the LNOs bring in stakeholders from all over. We've had numerous visits from members from HRC, a lot of input from OPMD and EPMD at HRC. There's been coordination with DMPM and the Army G1 because they do a lot of the analytic heavy lifting on the HQTA side, and we've done some cross coordination with USARC headquarters, and then we've also included some of the major commands throughout the force. So there's been significant coordination on the Release 3 build, and that continues today.
Two more questions. When does CLIC come online?
Right now, the plan is Release 3. So right in December 21 at when we first go live at Release 3, we do have an enhancement request to receive CLIC earlier, but at this point that's not a funded requirement. So the current plan is Release 3.
Another question is, how many or much data will be pulled in at all from other systems?
Can I clarify the question? Is it you mean for Release 3 or just now on Release 2? Currently from the ADS. Okay, so in Release 2, okay, I think I understand the question. So in the enhancement request for the Release 2 portion of the data warehouse, my intent is for us to receive essentially all the data that exists in HCM, so that we can, within Ad Hoc BI, build any type of report or analytic that we would need. So right now, the first stage of that was completed, the design document for the ad hoc data model for the departments, and department hierarchy was created. So that has been submitted to the government from the system integrator for feedback, and then they'll continue down the line with a position data model and soldier data model in order to bring any data that exists in HCM over to the BI data warehouse. Any data that exists from other authoritative systems from interfaces, we intend to bring as much of that data in as possible. But with that being said, some of that is not authoritative, or if it's not authoritative, we may not necessarily bring it over. So, I'm happy to work with anyone to go through like data field by data field so that we make sure that we get this right. But the rule of thumb is if it exists in HCM, I want it in the warehouse.
Have any other questions from the field for the group? All right, so I have nothing heard or seen in the chat panel. So thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. We will keep the conference line open for an additional 10 minutes so that further comments can be added to the panel. Please visit our IPPS-A social media pages and subscribe to our YouTube channel for webinar postings, functional videos, and news from the IPPS-A team. Again, thank you all for joining.